Uh, when Omar was talking, something that struck me was a quote that my wife and I love to share by Dr. James Comer. And it says that no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. In the business of basketball, it's all about relationships. We're trying to recruit this kid, recruit that kid, build relationships with their families and so forth, but also from a professional level, build relationships that way that might help us move or grow or learn a out of bounds play. But I do think that when we look at our relationships with our guys first or our girls, if you're coaching women's, we got to make sure that we're maximizing that. Oh, you spoke to it a little bit in terms of pouring into them. I just think that when I look at what's going on around the country, there's different levels to it. We got a group of young people that we're leading, that we're accountable for, and we got to make sure that we give them tools. But I'm also not blinded by the fact that the majority of the players that we have are African-American, Black, or Indigenous people of color. And so when I look at those individuals and how we need to pour into them and arm them and equip them, I think is what Omar said. It's a great responsibility. But then it moves outside of that. I think Coach Huff spoke to, or maybe Coach Burton spoke to, doing some things with some police officers on campus. We have to educate our campus community right where we are. And so as I look at this screen, I think everyone that's on this screen is committed to this fight that is in front of us. And so for me, my wife and I have been studying something called racial fatigue. And racial fatigue is, hey man, I got to keep explaining to someone that, no, I'm not Puerto Rican, even though I love that culture. Thank you for that compliment, but I'm an African-American. I just happen to be a light-skinned brother. There's so many layers to this racial piece. And I just think that we can't get fatigued in this fight. Coach Willis Wilson spoke earlier. He might be the most mature coach on the call. But one of the things he mentioned was talking about the historical context that he wanted to speak to. In my lifetime, I've had a Black man hold the highest office in the land in terms of President Obama. As a believer, a lover and follower of Christ, I'm living through a pandemic, so I'm getting reps and exercise in terms of my faith. And as a teacher first, what a great opportunity that we've been presented with. Now, those who know me most think I'm already kind of wired to be optimistic. I'm sure it comes from my faith, but that also comes from, I just believe that there have been people that have poured into me that I stand on their shoulders today. And I can't get fatigued. We've had so many Zoom calls, even with our players at Texas A&M. You can see some of those kids who were leaning into the calls earlier when this pandemic first happened are starting to lean out. So we got to keep bringing them in. And as I'm studying along with my wife about those who walk, both Black and white, in the 60s, there was some fatigue that took place. And to all of us that are on this call, it can't just be talk. It's going to have to be fighting. Brandon just mentioned that if I tick somebody off, I'm okay ticking somebody off. The fight and the sacrifice that's in front of us by making a commitment to eradicate systemic and institutional racism and police brutality can be a very heavy burden. And it's going to cost some relationships and it strains some that I have personally. And as a believer in Christ, 3 years ago, when you talk about the racial fatigue, 3 years ago, I was in Florida. Some of you guys know I coached at the IMG Academy, and I love my home church down there. And there was a moment where my wife and I partnered with a white couple who are dear friends of ours to lead this small group called Be the Bridge. And now I hear this particular study is kind of floating around now. And I heard Coach Burton say earlier, well, why didn't we make a big noise about this when Kaepernick took a knee? And I've been fighting myself because of the anger that has risen within me. And I remember doing life with Coach Omar, and he and I were talking about some of the deep-rooted hate, especially for those of us who may live in the South. And I think that we just have a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. And I mentioned about the racial fatigue that it overtook some of those who were both white and black who were fighting this great fight. And I revisit that because of this. Those who are not African American, black, or indigenous, person of color on this call, we need your help. We need your help more than anything. As my son asks me every day, can he go ride his bike to the cul-de-sac or back? I'm pausing, man. Hey, man, I'll ride with you. Hey, can you give me a minute? I need to make, hey, can you give me a minute? I need to do something, but I'll go with you. These are some concerns that I have as a father with 2 brown boys that I have to raise. You guys know what's going on. All of us on this call need to continue to lean in. But here's the other thing that we need: those who are white and our friends. Because when I think about my faith, there are people who are white, brothers and sisters that I love, that I do life with, that I've been mad at because they haven't done enough. And what I'm saying to you is continue to lean in. I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty. I'm saying we need your help. We need the conversation, because we're having this conversation with our players who are primarily black. We need someone to have this conversation. Again, no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. You have relationships with others who are not where you are, committed to the fight. I'm gonna read this last piece and I'm gonna move on. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Dr. King, I really think, man, he was talking to a lot of our a lot of our white friends about this fight that keeps coming to the doorstep of our black folk. And lastly, we can't forget the black women who sometimes continue to be marginalized. But I will say this: any movement that has ever taken place, any successful movement, whether that's building a business, whether that's a movement such as the one we have now, has never been successful without women. We need to make sure that we're embracing them, that we're loving on them. They can help us also as we partner with them to move this fight forward. And I just continue to invite those who are watching, those who are on this call, don't give up. We got to keep fighting a good fight. We can't get weary with doing good. Love you guys. I appreciate it, man. I'm blown away by what's taking place tonight. I'm just excited to be a part of it. Coach Hub, Adam, B, thank you guys so much for the invite. And I'm committed, man. Let's just keep each other encouraged as we walk down this road together.
Appreciate you, man. Vince, that was great. You know, when Brian and Adam and Coach Huff were putting this thing on, they emailed us the format. And after we get a chance to kind of speak, they also kind of partnered us. And when I saw I got to be Vince's partner, man, I was thankful for that, man.
Likewise, Coach.
You know, like so many things, we're all connected, you know, through 6 or 7 degrees of separation. And there's some people on here that I'm intimately close with, some of my best friends. And then there's some others that, you know, the names, but maybe you just haven't had a chance to connect with them on that level. And whatever everybody said has been so great, man. I've been taking notes. And so I know we're ready to get to kind of the question and answer part. So I'll be, you know, brief with just a little bit of my experiences through this time. I grew up southeast, right outside of Dallas. I went to Seagoville High School. My parents grew up in Dallas. They went to Samuel High School. And when I was probably in the 5th or 6th grade, my family moved into my dad's parents' house, which is in Dallas, in Pleasant Grove. If any of you guys have kind of recruited the Dallas area, it's right next to Forster Fieldhouse, where the Dr. Pepper tournament was and is, and a lot of the DISD schools play there. There's a little Catholic school right next to it. I lived right behind it. As a matter of fact, if you're ever recruiting there, Leonard Perry's on this call. He's the associate head coach at Pacific. And if you're ever at Forrester, go in there. He was all state in about 1937, playing for Justin F. Kimball. And he'll have a picture in there with some little bitty baby shorts on. But no, and so I had, as God kind of puts pieces together in your life, and Tyler mentioned it a little bit, I did have a unique perspective growing up at a very early age. I was never really confused on the racism part, on maybe some of the advantages that I had. I wasn't discriminated necessarily because of the color of my skin, but I certainly felt discrimination because of the people that I was with. I was never pulled over necessarily because I was a white guy getting pulled over, but I got pulled over because I was a white person with 3 of my black friends. So I've understood the plight fairly well in a fairly early age, not to be self-righteous or come off like I have this thing figured out, because I certainly do not. But I didn't really have any grand illusions of things in that nature. And so as this latest tragedy unfolded, and you saw the momentum and the groundswell of support, initially a little part of me was just kind of like, man, where has this been? Even though I think it's awesome to see. And what was important for me, I've always tried to live my life a certain way. But LP taught me that, Leonard Perry, who I talked about, we had a lot of conversations, and he was right. He was like, Ross, you don't, because of how you grew up, where you grew up, your love for people, your love for all people, he's like, you don't really understand the power you have in your platform now. And while you may have grown up with people that really know you, you're entering in a profession now where people are meeting you, and you are the associate head coach in North Texas, and they don't maybe know how you feel about everything. So while it's good to live it, and I do still believe that actions are significantly more important than words, but he also taught me that words are extremely powerful, and it's not just necessarily okay to live it. You do have to use your voice and your platform, because you are viewed differently than maybe just the kid growing up. And so I love what we're doing. I think a couple people have alluded to it. I think we're preaching to the choir in a sense, because I think everyone on here is thinking the same way and about the same things. But I also feel like it's more important than ever that we are unified in our purpose, because I do believe that there are people out there that want to capitalize on maybe some of the negative tensions that are going on. And Ryan, you said it early, maybe it's not necessarily a black versus white, but it's a right versus wrong. And there are certain forces on all sides, whether it's political or people with different agendas, that do want it to be, and they do want to drive a wedge. And so I think it's important that we all come together, which we are, that's we're on this, and then we can figure out how to make for real changes in systems. And it's great to, acknowledge problems are one thing, but then educating ourselves on legitimately how can you change these things. And we'll talk a little bit more about it when we get into the question and answer part. But that's just kind of my story. I'm loving being a part of this, because I'm loving and listening more than anything, man. I'm a lifelong learner. I certainly I have no answers, but I got a lot of questions. So I'm looking forward to the question and answer part. And like I said, man, appreciate everybody being on here, and just thankful, man. Really thankful to be in the position that I'm in. I mean, they usually say we save the best for last on these deals. Coach Wilson went about 3 hours ago, so he was by far the best. But Jay, I graduated from Commerce, where Jason is the head coach at now. So that's my alma mater. So obviously I'm like super proud of you, man, and super grateful for everything you do for that university. I know how much you pour into it. And you said, you felt like you had to be that much better than everybody else. And if you start out the season 26-0, you are that much better than everybody else, my man. So congratulations on that. Tyler, enjoyed your perspective. And like I said, Coach Wilson, really appreciated your insight on this deal, man. Learned a lot from it. I haven't played against your teams before, but I've watched your teams a lot in preparation for maybe common opponents that we we had, and I always appreciated how your teams played, man. And to hear you talk and hear your heart about all this stuff was awesome, man. So I appreciate you too. My question for Vince is, for our players, and we've had so many conversations with all our players throughout this period of time, and also for young professionals, young Black professionals, that maybe have had different experiences than what we've seen in the news and some of the tragic, terrible, disgusting, grotesque experiences. Maybe they personally have not experienced that. And, as you're kind of talking through these things with some of our players, even some of them, they have not had a negative experience with police. They maybe haven't necessarily experienced the outward form of racism or racial profiling. So as they just try to process this as well, and not being ashamed for their own experiences, but trying to, as we all are, trying to be empathetic and compassionate, what advice would you have for players and young professionals in that situation maybe?
I think, great question. Here's the thing. We're teachers, and we're always trying to prepare our students for a test. At some point, that young person is going to face the test. And unfortunately, in the Black community, we've had to have the talk, whether that came from a coach, whether that came from a parent, whether that came from someone that was within the community that was a part of the village, that would try to equip and prepare you for when you do have an encounter with a police officer, or when you do have an encounter with racism. As much as we practice, hey, this is how you beat the press. Hey, man, this is how you're going to guard the ball screen. We have a scouting report that we give our players, regardless of level that we coach at, to try to prepare them for the test. And if we're not, I think Coach Mann said earlier about how we get a chance to pour into our young people's lives. The greatest opportunity I think we all have is we get a chance to speak into their life. And we don't want to necessarily speak the gloom and doom that we may have seen portrayed a month ago from today. Most of them haven't. If they're still here, then obviously they haven't experienced that. But they might experience, as you said, Ross, some level of it. Whether that is, I get on the elevator and someone clutches their purse a little bit tighter. If a police officer does get behind me and those blue lights go on, man, my heart will drop in a minute. And so for me, I never forget I got stopped. And I was so convicted, and this is what I did. I was so convicted. You guys may remember there was a young man who was murdered in Minnesota, and he was kind of reaching across his person to grab certification for carrying a weapon. He communicated it. He was compliant. He was yes, sir, no, sir, at least from my understanding and what I viewed. And I was so convicted, man. Everything hit me all at one time. And I forget, and this is how I work often. I got 3 children. My wife homeschools our 3. I would go home from the office, give them baths, hang out, put them in the bed. I would go back to the office. So I spent time, hung out with the family. I would go back. I might be at the office for a couple more hours, write my letters. And I never forget one night she called me. She said, hey, babe, before you come home, can you stop by Walmart? I go to Walmart, pick up what she needed, got lost for probably there a little bit longer than I should have been. I'm on my way home and I get stopped, and it's probably around 12:30 at night. And I never forget thinking, let me cut the lights on in my car so that the officer, regardless of whether it's a male or a female, will feel safe. Let me pull into this well-lit area. And all in this time frame, I'm thinking I can't reach across my person. And in that short amount of time, I was able to get my wallet, my phone, everything on my dashboard. So here I have a pair of headphones. And so as I'm holding the steering column, I don't want to reach here. I only wanted to reach here. And so my hands will always be in plain sight of that officer. And I was so convicted, man. I went, and this is what happened. The officer was talking to me. He thought I had drove across the thick white line at the red light. He was communicating with me to keep me talking, to see if I had had a few beverages that I shouldn't have had while operating a vehicle. And I said this to him. As soon as he came to the car, I said, "Officer, hands on the wheel. I just want you to know that I'm complying with everything you say." Man, really? Yes, sir. And as I went, "Hey, can I reach and grab my ID?" Yes, sir. I thought I took some of the intensity off of it. It's 12:30 at night. I turn all the lights on within my car. I want to get home safe, and I want that person to get home safe too. And I want my experience on the side of the road to be as quick as possible. So I was so convicted, and I told the office, I said, "Hey man, you did a good job. You're trying to see if I've been drinking. Haven't been drinking. I just left the office. This is where I work." I gave him that very quickly. "Okay, hey man, I ran your stuff, coach. It's all good to go." And I asked him for a card so he could come and speak to our players so we could have a mock being arrested on the side of the road and how quickly that exchange could be. We got to arm our guys, man. We got to get reps. As many reps as we get at shooting the ball, at dribbling the ball, and at passing the ball, we got to get reps for our young people for when they do get stopped. And while I have the floor, I'm going to just say this last piece. For Coach Wilson to have accomplished becoming a head coach at the Division I level is almost miraculous, man. The institution of racism that we keep talking about that's in place, I want to give him his flowers while I'm up here. We talked about all the things he said. It's hard, and we all have seen it. And so for us to deal with the racism and see it, what are we telling our guys? We got to educate them on it. We got to educate them so they're equipped and prepared, because at some point they're going to be stopped. But it's also, in my opinion, there's a talent to not being stopped as it relates to us. I'm out there at 12:30 at night. Well, we tell our guys don't be out there at 12:30 at night. So I was able to speak to a very personal deal, say, "Hey man, handle your business for midnight." You know, the old folks used to tell us, nothing good happens after midnight. Well, here I am. Wasn't in any wrong, but I got stopped, and I was able to really get a good rep, and I was able to get home safely. And here's the thing. We're measured as coaches and our players. We measure our players on how they perform. And their greatest performance might be on the side of the road, whether they get home or not. And that's scary, man. That's scary. And raising two brown kids in my own house, I think about it often. I think about it often, man. And so we just got to make sure that we equip our guys and have a sense of urgency. It's a big deal. It's a big, big deal. And our guys clown and we have fun with them. We got to make sure they're going to follow our lead. We got to make sure they know how big of a deal this is and how great of an opportunity we have right now to inflict change upon our nation in a good way. So I hate to get on. I hope I wasn't preaching too much, but I had to make sure I spoke to that in the right way.
No, it was great, man.
This is a question I have for you, Ross. Ross, you're my guy, man. I love you. You and I do life. We check on each other throughout this pandemic. Your head coaching and waiting is just opportunity. I thought you were going to get one this year. This is my question for you. Both of us are men of faith. We love the Lord. I spoke a little bit earlier about our faith. My question for you, and this is where my heart is at when I ask you, man, I'm so excited about this opportunity we have, especially when I can partner with someone like you that I know where your heart is at. I know your journey. I know how you do life with others. How have you used your faith personally in addressing issues of systemic racism and social injustice within the white community?
Man, that's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind, to quote a little bit of the Bible is, lean not on your own understanding, because there's certainly so many things that I do not understand as it pertains to a lot of this. I think you can't be someone that overtly claims to love Jesus, to be a Christian, and still sit right with the things that have happened recently, that have happened 2 years ago, 1 year, that really happen every day. And so, the Bible talks about like, hey, Lord, hurt my heart with the things that hurt yours. And so I think if that's how we're all approaching it, it's not hard to see that all the things that we're talking about, how can we have so many talented people that don't get opportunities to be head coaches? How is there, and how is it that black males are disproportionately thrown in jail, 1 out of every 3? How is the wealth disparity in particular in major cities? How does this happen? And they're all branches from a root that is the system, that is in place. And so if you just are kind of trying to chop off the top of it like a weed, you're not really getting it, man. And you have to get down to the root of it, which in many cases is a heart issue. And that's where it's difficult, because just like when you're talking to people about your walk and your relationship with Jesus, you keep pouring into that cup, but they may not be quite ready to drink it. And my father was an alcoholic, and was a good father, drank himself to death. So I've addiction has been something that's important to me. And so it's just like this topic. If someone's not ready to address the issues that are leading to them drinking, then they can't really stop. It's a surface. And so, and that's why I'm passionate about it with our players. I don't care if they're ready to move forward in that space. This is a little sidebar, but I'll get back quickly because I know we're all tired. But I'm a big proponent of like outpatient treatment for players that may have substance abuse or alcohol abuse, because I know even though they may not be ready, you're still introducing it to them at a point. Maybe they can come back to it at a further part in their life. And I think that's the same thing in many cases with issues of racism, that so many of my extended family, not my immediate family, but maybe my extended family, maybe my extended friends, they're not quite ready to have that conversation. They're not quite ready to hear it, but it is my job to continually not only softly tiptoe around it, be like, no, man, here, let me tell you, this is my experiences. I'm not telling you something I think happens. I'm telling you something that I know happens. I'm not telling you something that I think I saw or I'm looking on the news. I'm telling you about real life experiences that I have, that people that I have, that I love have. So, and ultimately it is a heart issue. But I do feel like what we've all alluded to now, that this was such an intense time that people had to pay attention to it. And so I just think, tying the faith component into it, you can't get tired of talking about it. You mentioned it. You have to continue to pray for strength and pray for not only the people that think the way you think. Most of us on here tonight, we think the same way. We got to pray for the people that don't think like we did.
Yes.
As you know, Vince, Jesus didn't spend just time with the disciples, man. He spent time with the sinners, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, and the murderers.
Yes.
So it's easy for us to have this conversation with us. We're all in agreement.
Yes.
But having those conversations, and more importantly, when you're talking about myself and the white community in this, don't be afraid to have those conversations. And don't let something that you hear just slide past like you didn't really hear that. And don't be afraid to stand tall. And just when you maybe think that people aren't going to get it, will never get it, you'll be surprised, man. And so that's just my 2 cents on it. Don't know if it's right, wrong, or like I said, Coach T. And don't be afraid to show grace and mercy, man, to everyone. I think B alluded to it early, man. The Drews B situation, everybody, went at him, rightfully so. He stepped in it. It was tone deaf. But then when he does want to try to apologize, you got to give him grace and mercy until he proves you wrong again. So we've all received a ton of grace and mercy. So give it as well.